it or not, there is a way of writing melodies that requires no complex theory, no experience, and no advanced skills on an instrument. Not only that, this way of writing melodies is so much fun and feels so creative. I guarantee it will be a game changer for your songwriting. And we're going to start by taking the notes of a key and having a quick discussion about a really important concept, which is the idea that some notes in a scale are stable and some notes are unstable. So in the key of C, we have 7 notes before getting to the octave. The first note in the scale is the most stable. The first note in any scale is the most stable. It's the home note. It has no tension or need to move. However, some of the other notes in the scale do have a tendency to move. But before we look at those, let's talk about the other 2 stable notes in the scale. So we have the 1, then we have the 5, and then we have the 3. In that order, those are the 3 most stable notes in the scale. 1, 5, 3. Now, the other notes, the 2, the 4, the 6, the 7, are unstable in that they want to move. They want to resolve either up or down. And this is really important to what we're about to do. So that 2 note really wants to fall either to the 1 or it wants to rise up to the 3. The 4th really wants to fall a semitone to the 3rd. The 6 wants to fall to the 5. And the 7 wants to rise up to the octave. And the reason we care about having these unstable notes resolving to stable notes is because that's what creates tension and then release. The unstable notes hold the tension, the stable notes release that tension. And ideally, we want our melodies to have a good blend of tension and release. That's what makes it interesting for the listener. Now, once we have that idea laid out, it allows us to talk about the concept that I really want to focus on as a game changer for songwriters. And that is to think of our melodies as either questions or answers. And the beauty of this method is that we're already familiar with it. We're already used to hearing melodic phrases when spoken by other people in conversations. Every conversation we have questions, we have answers, we have statements. And we know that we're hearing a question or an answer or perhaps a statement by the melody in the voice. So I'm going to demonstrate this, and what I want you to listen out for are a couple of key things. Firstly, we're really focused on the last note in the phrase, the last note in each of the melodies that we're creating. And what we're really listening for is, are we landing on a stable note or an unstable note as that last note in the melody? So with those 2 things in mind, let's just play around with a couple of basic melody ideas. Now that melody rises up the 3rd, the 4th, the 6th, and then lands on the 5th. So no matter what notes come before it, the last note we hear in that phrase is a stable note. If we move that melody down here though, now it's ending on the 4th, and we can hear that that's not stable, that's unresolved. So what is the difference between those 2 melodies? Well, you can hear that this one, because it lands on a resolved note, it feels stable. It feels like more of a statement or more of an answer. Whereas this one feels more like a question. Now let's reverse the order of those 2 and imagine that we start with the question. That is a classic call and response, a question with an answer. But we're not using any music theory other than understanding that there are stable and unstable notes. What we're really doing is using that knowledge to now think of this melody writing as a conversational exercise. I want to ask a question. Maybe ask another question. Maybe ask another question. And finally answer. That's 3 questions followed by 1 simple 1-note answer. And this is where it gets really fun, when we start stitching together a series of questions and even considering what type of question we might be asking. These questions all sound quite floaty and nice and gentle. And the answer as well was very nice and pleasant. But we can introduce a little more attitude to some of these melodies, and I'll do that in a moment. The other thing we really want to pay attention to is the shape and the direction of the melody. Is it moving up or is it moving down? Or is it perhaps doubling back on itself? So as I was saying before, the direction is really important. And the direction of this melody is that it rises and then doubles back on itself. Let's reverse that and see if it makes a difference. There we start with the fifth, drop down to the second, up to the third, and still we land on the fourth. So it's still a question, but is it a different kind of question? As opposed to... And the interesting thing is, yes, it does feel like a slightly different question because the first one is dropping down from a higher note. So it has a downward inflection. So falling, even though we're landing on the fourth, gives it that sense of a question, but it's not the same kind of question as this. And what happens if we take that phrase and now jump up to the sixth instead of the fourth? Different kind of question again. What happens if we jump to a note that's not in the scale? That note there has a lot of tension in it. And so it really poses a very different kind of question. It's posing a question with a lot more tension in it, a lot more anxiety in it. But we can resolve. Or we can ask another question that is also unsettling. Before giving an answer. And I find this idea really powerful and a really lovely way to think about melody writing because it allows me to think about melody writing in a different way. It lets me ask the question, what makes for a great conversation? If I'm catching up with a friend and we're having a conversation and that friend doesn't ask any questions but just gives a series of statements, that's not really a conversation. That's the other person giving their opinion. But a great conversation is often one that starts with some great questions. That's what really opens up great conversations. And so if we take that idea and apply it to melody writing, we may find that our melodies open up and ask more questions that the listeners then want answers to. Just a quick reminder that our online songwriting community is now hosting weekly song feedback sessions. So if you're a songwriter who's looking to get meaningful, high-quality feedback on their songs, we're offering a 14-day free trial so you can come along, jump into one of the sessions, and join our growing community of songwriters from all over the world. You'll find a link at the top of the description. Hope to see you there. So going back to that analogy of having a conversation with a friend who just keeps giving their opinion and just keeps making statements but asks no questions, what would that sound like melodically? Well, given that the one is the most stable note, resolving down to the one would continually feel like our melody is just making statement after statement with no ambiguity. It would sound like this. So you can hear that if the one is at the end of every melodic statement, it always feels like it's resolved. It always feels like the statement is being made or the answer is being given, but there are no questions being asked. But if we can just change maybe the first two of those melodic statements and ask a couple of questions, then the answer becomes very satisfying. And the first time I actually heard melody writing talked about in this way was when I was watching Hans Zimmer on masterclass.com. And he talked about melody writing in exactly this way. He talked about asking questions and then asking more questions and then maybe giving an answer. But he made the point that the question is usually more interesting than the answer. The answer feels so resolved, it's final, but the question is open. It invites the possibility of this melody or this song going somewhere else. And so His thought was if you can keep extending the question, if you can keep delaying the answer, it makes for a more interesting musical experience. So let's switch to the key of C minor. Here's a melody, which is using all stable notes, the 1, the flat 3, and the 5. The next note will really determine a certain mood and give this melody a direction. That feels like a pretty gentle kind of question. But if I do this, Hans Zimmer would say that's got attitude in it. You know, that is full of tension. But this is great because it means that instead of thinking of these intervals as numbers, we can just start thinking in terms of the mood they're creating. And if we're creating a song where we want a particular mood, this is a really fun and effective way to go about it. So there's a question. Followed by the answer. There's an extension to that question. And there's a different kind of answer. Now I'm doing these on piano, but a really fun exercise is to take some of these ideas and start trying them out on voice, because after all, our voice is going to be carrying the lead melody of our song. Some of these ideas will sound singable and some will not. Sounds quite haunting and it sounds quite singable. Now, I don't think I would have come up with that melody if I was sitting with my guitar and humming out some melodic ideas. So another way we can apply this idea to songwriting is to think about the sections of the song we're creating. Perhaps in the verses, we want to avoid any kind of answer and just ask a lot of questions and then leave the answers or the statements up to the chorus section. So here's our first little melody. Resolving down to the 2, so that's unstable, that's a question. Here's the second melody. And if we repeat that and imagine that's the verse, listen to how unresolved it feels. So all we've done there is ask a series of questions. Now we're in a position to resolve those questions with answer statements. Lean into the 1, the flat 3, or the 5 in the scale. So before you go and write any more melodies, try this method. Ask yourself, what kind of conversations am I having with the melodies that I'm creating? Am I asking enough questions, or are my melodies too resolved? Are they just giving too many answers or making too many statements? And I'd love to hear in the comments what kind of results you get with this method and what kind of songs it leads to. So please post in the comments any reflections or insights you gained from trying this method out. Happy songwriting. Bye.